The slightly mysterious and much coveted supply delivery message. Everybody wants it, not everybody gets it. But why is that? That's what we're about to find out. But first, a word from today's sponsor. But first, what do we mean by supply delivery message? We mean the message that pops up when somebody delivers supplies to a base or storage depot and asks if you want to comment them, where people only have to click the green check mark in order to comment the delivery person, provided that they have comments available. But not every delivery seems to prompt it. Thinking about this a bit more, there seem to be 4 factors that could influence whether or not this message gets triggered: value of delivery, stockpile type, place of delivery, time between deliveries. Value of delivery. To determine the value of deliveries, we can make use of our facility log and record our supply value delivered values before and after submitting supplies into a stockpile. For these different supply values, we will start at the lifeblood of Foxhole, salvage. So, here we are at a town base with salvage in our backpack. We open the F1 menu and click on our own name in the player list. This, however, does not bring up the drop-down menu, so we exit the game and reopen the game and redeploy to the base where our truck with salvage is. We first check if we can now access our activity log. With that confirmed, we walk to the base, make a note of our current supply value delivered value, currently 0, open the base menu and submit 1 salvage into the stockpile. Open our activity log again and make a note of the new supply value delivered, or SVD, which is 1. We repeat this another 24 times with a single piece of salvage and note that each submission gives us a difference of 1 SVD before and after submitting the salvage. We then repeat the process with 2 pieces of salvage at a time and note that this too results in a difference between SVD values of 1. A quick averaging of the numbers: 75 salvage submitted for a total SVD of 50 gives us a preliminary value of 1.5 SVD per piece of salvage submitted, which is a pretty good indication that there is a rounding function present. We continue the data gathering with 25 submissions of 3 pieces of salvage for an SVD of 2 per submission, 25 submissions of 4 pieces of salvage for an SVD difference of also 2 per submission, on to 25 submissions of 5 pieces of salvage for a SVD difference of 3, 25 submissions of 6 pieces of salvage for a SVD difference of 3 as well. At this point, we have submitted a total of 25 plus 50 plus 75 plus 100 plus 125 plus 150 is 525 salvage in series of 25 without changing values, so it feels safe to switch to 10 submissions per salvage amount. We continue our data gathering with 10 submissions of 7 pieces each for a SVD difference of 4, 10 submissions of 8 pieces each for an SVD difference of 4, 10 submissions of 9 pieces each for an SVD difference of 5, and 10 submissions of 10 pieces each for an SVD difference of 5 as well. With a total of 865 salvage submitted for a total supply value delivered of 480, this would work out to an average of 0.55 SVD per piece of salvage. But looking at the SVD for the submission of 10 pieces of salvage, we can see that this is not true, since 10 times 0.55 is 5.5. And assuming normal rounding for the value, this should work out to an SVD of 6 instead of 5. Let's bump up the numbers and see how that changes the picture. With 10 submissions of 100 pieces of salvage each, we see an SVD of 45. 10 submissions of 101 pieces of salvage each, we see a SVD of 46. And finally, with 10 submissions of 1,000 salvage each, we see an SVD of 450. Looking back on our previous data, we can conclude that the supply value delivered of salvage is the amount of salvage times 0.45 rounded up to the nearest integer. So, 1 salvage will have a value of 0.45, which rounded up to the nearest integer gives it an SVD of 1. And 2 salvage will have a value of 2 times 0.45 is 0.9, rounded up to the nearest integer will also give a SVD of 1. Checking this to our odd one out in the first batch, 10 salvage will have a value of 10 times 0.45 is 4.5, which rounded up to the nearest integer indeed gives us an SVD of 5 instead of the SVD of 6 we initially expected. Then we move on to what things in Foxhole are actually made of. Basic materials. We follow the same procedure here. Check activity log, submit preset amount of BMATs into a stockpile, check activity log again and calculate the difference. Rinse and repeat. After submitting batches of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 100, 101, and 1000 BMATs, we can see that the consequent SVD for one basic material is 1. Next in line, diesel. We start the same procedure and quickly see that jerry cans of diesel do not have a SVD. To round out these salvage products, we check explosive powder, formerly known as EMATs. After submitting batches of 1, 5, and 100 explosive powder, we can confidently say that one explosive powder has a supply value submitted of 20. Moving on to components with the same method. Check activity log, submit preset amount of components, check activity log again, calculate the difference in SVD. After submitting series of 1, 5, 10, and 100 components, we can conclude that they have an SVD of 0.7, rounded up to the nearest integer. Quickly checking this with our data. 5 components times 0.7 is 3.5, rounded up to the nearest integer is 4, and that does correspond to the value we got for the submissions. On to the refinery products of components, refined materials, also known as RMATs. Having submitted batches of 1, 5, and 10 RMATs, we calculate an SVD of 80 per RMAT. Then on to sulfur. After submitting sets of 1, 5, 10, and 100 pieces, and one submission of 1000 sulfur, we arrive at an SVD of 1.05, rounded up to the nearest integer for sulfur. Quickly checking this against our results. For one piece, that is 0.15, rounded up to the nearest integer, gives 2, which is correct. For 5 pieces, that is 5 times 1.05, which is 5.25, rounded up to the nearest integer is 6, which also checks out. Then the refinery product of sulfur, heavy explosive powder. After the submission of batches of 1, 5, 10, 100, and one submission of 1000 HE powder, we get no integer value. But with 53,340 divided by 1000 from the last test, resulting in a value of 53.34, we can use that, rounded up to the nearest integer, as the SVD for heavy explosive powder. Checking this against our results, we see that for 5 pieces of HE powder, we will have a value of 266.7, which, rounded up to the nearest integer, gives us 267, which is what we indeed get for submitting 5 pieces. Last in the materials list is coal and gravel. Submitting series of 1, 5, 10, and 100 coal into a stockpile, we arrive at an SVD of 1 for coal. With the refinery product of coal, gravel, after submitting sets of 1, 5, 10, 100, and one set of 1000, we arrive at an SVD of 5. The odd one out, wreckage, just as diesel does not have a supply value delivered. Value threshold. With this groundwork laid down, it is time to determine the minimal supply value we need to submit in order to trigger the supply delivery message. But before we dive into the weeds of supply value, we need to establish a safe time frame between submissions, so we know for certain that if we do not get the supply delivery message, it is because the value is too low, and not because we submitted it too quick. From experience, I know that a truck full of low casters will trigger the message, and my memory, though flawed, tells me that 30 IRL minutes between deliveries will result in another supply delivery message. We quickly test this by bringing a truck with 15 crates of low casters to a base, checking our map for the in-game time and date, submitting the crates into the stockpile, and 30 minutes later, or 12 in-game hours, repeating the process with another batch of 15 crates. This confirms that 30 minutes is a safe time frame between deliveries to trigger the second message. With that established, we start our data gathering. We drive another truckload of 15 crates to the base, check our activity log for our current SVD total, open our map to keep track of the in-game time, submit the 15 crates of low casters in this case, confirm that the message pops up, and check our activity log again to see the difference in SVD. We subtract the first SVD from our current SVD and find a supply value delivered of 1500. Half an hour later, we repeat the process, but this time with 15 crates of bandages, which we assume at a cost of 80 BMATs per crate will result in an SVD of 1200. We check our activity log, check our map to confirm at least 12 in-game hours or 30 IRL minutes have lapsed, and submit the bandages. Confirm we get the supply delivery message and confirm that the difference in SVD is indeed 1200 as expected. Next up, a truckload with 15 crates of radio. That cost 15 times 75 is 1125 BMATs, and confirm that an SVD of 1125 does also trigger the message. Down the value list it goes with 15 crates of Hawthorns at an SVD of 15 times 70 is 1050, which also prompts the message. followed by 15 crates of Kamitas at an SVD of 15 times 60 is 900. That also brings up the message. 15 crates of .44 ammo with an SVD of 15 times 40 is 600, also does trigger the message. And only when we arrive at 15 crates of metal beams at an SVD of 15 times 25 is 375, we do not get a supplies delivered message. So we now have established that the threshold for the message to show up lies between an SVD of 600 and 375. To proceed, we calculate the value in the middle between 600 and 375, which is 387.5, and find a supply value close to that we can deliver in crates. In this case, 12 crates of .44 ammo will give us an SVD of 480, so that is our next submission. This does not trigger a message, so we now look for the value between 480 and 600, which is 540. 9 crates of Kamitas will give us an SVD of 540 exactly, and that proves unsuccessful as well. Next up, an SVD of 570, which is between 540 and 600, which is equivalent to 5 crates of Lowcasters and 1 crate of Hawthorns. We still have no luck. Then, for an SVD of 585, we deliver 4 crates of Lowcasters, 1 crate of radios, 1 crate of .44 ammo, and 1 crate of Hawthorns, and still get no message. For an SVD of 595, we submit 4 crates of Lowcasters, 1 crate of radios, 1 crate of .44, and 1 crate of bandages, and still no luck. To really confirm our misfortunes here, we deliver a simple 5 crates of Lowcasters and 99 BMATs for a total SVD of 599, and confirm that the minimum supply value delivered needs to be 600 in order for the message to show up. Just for shits and giggles, we also tested threshold with salvage. Using the SVD of .45 per salvage, rounded up to the nearest integer, we can expect 1332 salvage to trigger the message, since 1332 times .45 is 599.4. That, rounded up to the nearest integer, would be 600. So we submit 1332 salvage into the base and see that indeed a message pop up. To be absolutely certain, we then submit 1331 salvage, which would have an SVD of 1331 times .45 is 598.95, rounded up to the nearest integer is 599, and should not trigger the message, which it doesn't. Mixed material values. Now that we established the minimum SVD for the supplies delivered message, we can check the values of other materials when used in supplies. Although we established that BMATs have an SVD of 1, whether submitted as basic materials or as supplies made out of BMATs, this is not necessarily true for the other materials. To check the value of explosive powder when used in supplies, we submit 2 crates of Mammons, which are produced with 100 BMATs and 10 explosive powder each. We should expect a total SVD for 2 crates of Mammons of 2 times 100 plus 20 times 20 is 600. Since an SVD of 600 will trigger a supplies delivered message, we will have immediate confirmation that our calculation was correct. We submit 2 crates of Mammons into the base and...
Wait, why?
Upon checking the activity log and doing a before and after calculation, we find a total SVD of 240. Suggesting that EMATs, when used in supplies, only have a value of 2 instead of 20, since 200 BMATs accounts for 200 SVD and the remaining 40 SVD value can be attributed to the explosive powder. To be more confident in the conclusion, we submit a single crate of stickies, which, based on these new values, should have an SVD of 150. 50 BMATs for 50 SVD and 50 EMATs for 100 SVD value. This is indeed the case. So a submission of 4 crates of stickies should trigger the supplies delivered message, which it does. And a submission of 3 crates of stickies and 149 BMATs for a total SVD of 599 should not trigger a message, which is also true. Based on the previous results, we should check for the SVD of RMATs inside supplies as well. For this, we use a crate of Malone Redcatchers, which only requires 5 RMATs. At a price of 100 basic materials and 5 refined materials, we could expect an SVD of 100 plus 5 times 80 is 500. When we submit a crate of Redcatchers, however, we find out that the SVD for 1 crate of Redcatchers is 120. So, 100 SVD for the BMATs and 20 for the RMATs, which works out to an SVD of 4 for each RMAT used in supplies. With that knowledge, 5 crates of red catcher should have an SVD of 600 and trigger a message, which it does. And 4 crates of red catchers and 119 BMATs will not, since those only add up to an SVD of 599, which is also correct. Then finally, to check the value of heavy explosive powder in supplies, we submit 1 crate of 120mm shells, which should have an SVD of 120 plus 5 times 53.35 is 387. Upon submitting 1 crate, we find out that the actual SVD is 140, meaning 120 SVD for the BMATs and 20 SVD for 5 HE mats, which gives us an SVD of 4 for HE mats used in supplies as well. Timing. To test if there is a minimum time necessary between 2 submissions to trigger the supplies delivered message, we come to a storage depot with a shipment of 6 crates of lowcasters, the bare minimum SVD to get the supplies delivered message. We check the map to note the in-game time, submit the crates, wait the predetermined amount of time, in this case 30 minutes, open our map to check our in-game time again, and make sure that 30 minutes, or 12 in-game hours, have lapsed. We then submit the next batch of crates and confirm once again that 30 minutes between submissions is enough time. We repeat the process on the other, low end of the spectrum. So we bring 12 crates of lowcasters, open our map to check our in-game time, submit half of the crates, wait 2 in-game hours, or 5 IRL minutes, and submit the second set of crates. This does not trigger the message. Now we know that the minimum time required between 2 submissions is somewhere between 5 minutes and 30 minutes. To get closer to the answer, we go for the time in between those values. So 30 plus 5 is 35, divided by 2 is 17.5 minutes. This corresponds to 7 in-game hours. We once again bring 12 crates of lowcasters to our storage depot, check our map to determine in-game time, submit 6 crates, wait 17.5 minutes or 7 in-game hours, and submit the second batch. Since the second one also triggered the message, we now have a new high-end measurement. We once again calculate the value in between our high and low end. So 17.5 plus 5 is 22.5, divided by 2 is 11.25 minutes, or 4.5 hours of in-game time. We repeat the process with 11.25 minutes between the 2 submissions and do not get a message at the second submission, meaning that we now have a new range of between 4.5 in-game hours and 7 in-game hours, or between 17.5 minutes and 11.25 minutes. Not wanting to use the awkward average of those 2 values, I decided to go to the lowest full hour for the next one, 5 in-game hours, or 12.5 minutes. With 12.5 minutes between submissions, both will trigger a supplies delivered message, giving us a nice minimum time frame necessary. To test if there is a minimum time necessary between 2 submissions to trigger the supplies delivered message in a base, we have Ninti here with us. Ninti will submit 1 batch of BMATs with an SVD above threshold into this relic base, wait till the supplies delivered message disappears, and then submit the next batch. As we can see, both batches did trigger the message, suggesting there is no minimum time frame between submissions for the message to show up when submitting to a base. Stockpile type. Supplies delivered to a storage depot or seaport inside a Logi hub will not trigger the message. A Logi hub is any town that has a refinery, a factory, a garage, and a tech center. So, if we submit 10 crates of lowcasters into the public stockpile of the seaport here in Cocktail Station, that has factories, a garage, and a refinery, we can see that no message pops up, because this is a Logi hub. If we submit 6 crates of lowcasters into the town base in Cocktail Station, however, there will be a supplies delivered message. If we come to the seaport in Kirknell, which does have factories but no refinery, and we submit 5 crates of fiddlers into the public stockpile, we see that we get a supplies delivered message, as it does not count as a Logi hub. The same is true here in Foxcatcher, which has a refinery but no factory. If I submit 6 crates of BMATs into the public stockpile of the storage depot, a message will pop up. When submitting to a stockpile of a base, you need to have your spawn set at that particular base for the message to show up for yourself. So, when we submit 7 crates of lowcasters into the relic base here in Stoic, without having our spawn set, we see that no message shows up. Quickly setting our spawn, and then submitting the remaining 8 crates of lowcasters does show us the message of the last submission. Conclusion. So in order for us to trigger the supplies delivered message at any storage depot or seaport that is not a Logi hub, we need to submit a minimal supply value delivered of 600 and leave at least 12.5 minutes, or 5 in-game hours, between consecutive submissions. In order for us to trigger the supplies delivered message at a base, we have to submit a minimal supply value delivered of 600, and there is no minimum required time between submissions. The supply value delivered, or SVD, can be calculated as follows. For materials submitted as stacks or crates, so not used as ingredients in supplies, salvage, amount of salvage times 0.45 rounded up to the nearest integer. BMATs, amount of BMATs. Explosive powder, amount of explosive powder times 20. Components, amount of components times 0.7 rounded up to the nearest integer. RMATs, amount of RMATs times 80. Sulfur, amount of sulfur times 0.05 rounded up to the nearest integer. Heavy explosive powder, amount of heavy explosive powder times 53.34 rounded up to the nearest integer. For materials submitted as ingredients of supplies, BMATs, amount of BMATs. Explosive powder, amount of explosive powder times 2. RMATs, amount of RMATs times 4. Heavy explosive powder, amount of heavy explosive powder times 4.